Hey everybody, thanks for making the time on a Saturday. This is pretty awesome. We're hopefully going to get inspired. We're going to have some fun and play around with audio and MIDI and signals in general. But before we start, I just wanted to have everybody just check in real quick. And I'm curious to see how many people have actually taken courses at dadageek before, or how many folks just heard of this. So if you've taken a course, just raise your hand or chime in the chat. Awesome. It's a great community. I love being a part of it, and I love meeting folks that have come through the school. They really empower their students, so it's cool to be doing something like this. And if you haven't, make sure to check it out. Like Kyle said, there's a lot of ways to interact with the school, even during quarantine. And if scholarships are an issue, they offer that, and it's really cool. But anyway, I also want to encourage you all to come back for the next two workshops and consider signing up for Adam's class, because Adam is very, very passionate about music and sound design, and he's really talented in production. And if you don't know a lot about Ableton, you'll kill two birds with one stone, because you'll make some music, it's production focused, like he said, and you'll actually end up learning a lot about Ableton. So yeah, thanks for joining, Adam. So today, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to be talking about signal processing, right? And what that means. And it means a lot of different things, especially in live. We're going to cover a lot of practical stuff, and then a lot of stuff that's just kind of fun and experimental to generate samples. A little bit about myself before we start. I'm an Ableton certified trainer, and my company is called Musical Guest. I mainly do two things. Either I teach people and help schools develop curriculum around Ableton, and I help people learn how to use it. Or I work with musicians that are trying to program Ableton sets, or use Ableton on stage, or use some kind of interesting technology in a non-disruptive way on stage. And if you're interested, you can follow me on Instagram at Musical Guest, and I like to post a lot of my stuff there. Today, I'm going to start off by showing you this set that's very simple, and I'm going to try to show you how to make the most variety of sounds from the same original signal source, if that makes sense. So let me just play this real quick. And a while back, actually for a long time, I've wanted to buy an instrument called the Fender 6. It's between a bass and a guitar, so it's like a low octave but not too low instrument. You can use it in a lot of creative ways. And I was about to buy one online, and then I found one on Facebook Marketplace. And when I started approaching the person on Facebook Marketplace, I learned that the instrument had a history, and that it belonged to the woman that I was talking to's deceased brother, who had passed recently. And when we were negotiating the sale of the instrument, she mentioned that she wanted the instrument to continue making music. So right away, my mind went to, let's capture it and make an instrument rack in Ableton Live. So originally, the original signal is here. It's just a bunch of different plucks of different notes in the bass. And one thing that I like about Ableton Live is that, in designing your instrument, you can make a lot of decisions about how that signal is processed. So you heard, just kind of the clean sound of this instrument, but I decided that I really wanted it to have some range. Originally, it was just very plucky. I added some delay in there, which you can manipulate on the feedback. Let me raise this a little bit. And then an arpeggiator, of course. Then that delay feedback just to create some tails. You can also mess with the attack and the crush and stuff. So if
Could,
you...
could I could I
yeah,
hear that original recording just out of sheer
yeah,
curiosity?
absolutely.
Like where
Uh,
you cut it from?
Let me solo this. And it's a bunch of different instances of these notes. Let me raise the gain on it. Some of them are not the ones that I used,
Hmm.
but I ended up finding the ones that work the best at different octaves. So it's just, I really try to go for palm muted tones, because that's where I think that instrument shines, and I wanted to make a pluckable instrument. And if I hold, so the ARP didn't really make sense in that clip that I was showing earlier, but if I play a chord and then turn on the ARP,
Yeah, nice.
And of course, a bit crusher. Just I really wanted it to be able to mutate and change in a lot of different ways. And then when you go down all the way, we can turn off that arpeggio. But yeah, so just opening this device, Ableton gives you the ability to, start from this original audio source. And I'll walk you through what I did in case you're not familiar with the process. But you can take it into an effect called a sampler. And in sampler, you can isolate these specific sections. And not only that, you can bring in different samples and create different zones. And in these zones, you can tell, your keyboard range up here, which one of the different sections of the sample you want to play. Because, if you record something in a higher octave range as an original source, if you start pitching it down too much, it'll degrade and might be what you want, but I wanted it to sort of make sense as the original sound. So then after creating this sampler device, I ended up creating an effect rack because I wanted this pack. And by the way, you all can download this on Gumroad. I'll share the link in a little bit when I see the chat after I stop sharing my screen. But I wanted people to be able to make different kinds of music with this because of that promise that I made to the person's sister. So you can see I really went through a long thought process of which effects I ended up adding to this because I wanted to color it a certain way. And I really, really, not only thought about the order of the signal chain, but I thought of how it interacted with each other when it changed. So Ableton Live also, when you start grouping things, gives you the ability to map or unmap any control within a device rack to these controls over here called macro controls. And I wanted things to happen like when the filter frequency changed and got a little bit lower here and I started cutting the highs, I wanted this other shelf up here to go up a little bit, this shelf that started at 1K up, just so that the original signal would be muted as it went into these effects, but then as it came out, it got a little brighter. And then I could do cool stuff like map a filter before this effects, this group of effects here to the left, and map the filters here and here to the same knob in this device rack so that I'm able to cut. And there's a little bit of a difference in how they're moving and the resonance, but I'm able to cut the signal pre-effects and post-effects just to be able to really control how I can sweep it. And again, this was just my personal take on what I wanted this instrument to be, and then after that, people can really take the liberty of whatever they want to do with it. But yeah, so this is just one way, right? You take a sample, and then you create an instrument, and sampler lets you pitch it up and down. Then you can add traditional devices and effects to affect that signal. So then the next example I want to take you to is taking, we're going to continue on the theme of the least amount of sound sources and making them sound interesting, right? So I'm going to take us to this drum here. And that ding, if anybody heard it, was not part of the loop. That's somebody coming in. So I just got a really simple loop because I wanted to expand it together, right? So one of the things that I really like to use in signal processing in live is routing. So what I just did is created a new audio track, Command-T is the shortcut. And what I'm doing is I'm going to create a track that receives audio from this drum kit so that I can process it separate from the original source. So a lot of you might already know this, but when you're sending a track to the master, you can process it in parallel and send that process track to the master as well and bus audio into it. So what I want to do first is I want to select my audio source. So Ableton's routing section is here in the middle of the track, and it's really easy to follow because you can literally read it like a sentence. So audio from, and instead of an external input, I want to get this track number 2 conundrum, the conundrum kit, and now it's receiving audio from there. And then under this, we've got the monitor section. So I just want to monitor in. When you set monitor in, it's going to automatically let you monitor what is coming in as opposed to having to arm the track. And then the audio is going to the master track. So again, we're doing this in parallel. So if I just play this, you can automatically see there's an audio level happening in this track. And if I solo it, we won't really hear a difference because we're hearing the same signal source. So what we can also do here is in the second drop-down box, audio from that conundrums track, then we can go into the devices in the track and get really specific. So I can just say, I want to get the conundrum kick, pre-effects, post-effects, or post-mixer. And in this case, I'm just going to take it pre-effects. So again, I'm just hearing a kick drum coming in here. But what I want to showcase is one of my go-to whenever I feel stuck and I want to add complexity to something that's really simple and maybe just like an underlying bed of harmony for something, is going to my audio effects in my browser and getting Resonators. And then so I'm going to get Resonators, and what Resonator lets you do is add harmony to sound that has no harmonic content. So you can get a percussive source like this drum, and we're going to process it. And the way Resonators works is you get to pick a starting note. And I think what I played earlier was in C. So I'm going to keep it in C, but I could easily just shift, and it lets you know which octave you're on too. So this is the second from the middle C. And then, then we're going to go into these different voices. So it's got 5 voices, and we can pitch these voices up and down, but I'm going to let you hear what it sounds like just as it is. Right, and I can bring the original kick down because again we're getting this pre-effects, which is and it's set to in, so we're always going to hear the sound source. So let's explore Resonators a little bit without hearing that kick and see what we can get up to. So again, we've got this original voice, and we can play with the decay, make it a little bit more percussive. And then let's go on to the second voice and start playing with the pitch a little bit. And make this 100% wet. So you can see here the harmony start building up. And I really just like to play with this and follow my ears and not really think about like where the semitones are going. And that sounds pretty cool. So, you know, we can just kind of play with that and then start blending the drums back in. So instead of using our dry wet, we want to keep this track as a processing track. So we're going to keep this completely wet. I'm just going to start bringing my drums back in. Start either adding something extra, right? And I'm not really having to do much more like composing or arranging. I'm letting the signal kind of play with the other signal and turn into something else all of a sudden. And again, you can play with that decay knob and get really percussive. Or you can have really long, drony almost decays, right? So let's keep it kind of percussive, and let's keep making this a little bit more interesting. What we can do in live too is we can bring in, like we call them dummy clips, or sometimes they're called ghost clips. We can basically take any audio clip like this one that I have in the 6th track, and I'm going to copy it and paste it into this bus track. And what I want to do is double click into the clip and just completely lower the gain so that there's no audio coming out of it. And what I really want to use it for is mapping automation. So in session mode, you want to launch a clip before you look for the automation in it. So what I want to do is I want to map automation to this clip and say, you know, right click, show automation, and it'll take me right back to this clip and reveal the envelope curve right here. So what we can start doing is finding, you know, different pitches for that, for the original note to go into. And then you can do cool stuff like adding a little bit of a slide as it goes from one pitch to the next. And if we make that decay longer, you'll hear that kind of bouncy. Right, and then something else that my ear always goes to when I hear a signal that's this like lush and clean is dirtying it up a little bit. And a really atypical use for a device is using glue compressor as a saturator. And what we can do for that is we want to turn the range knob down so that when we start compressing it and making up the gain, we start getting a little bit of clipping. We can turn on soft clipping. And then basically it's kind of like a little bit of a gain device, a saturation device. We can blend in a little bit. And it really makes things sound a little bit more tough and in your face. So we can blend it. And then something we can do after that is get another device that's an audio effect called Echo. And we hear that repitching, we can turn repitch off. And right away it's, you know, creating a harmonic bed that wasn't there from the original kick. And we can get into a lot of fun mapping this and getting into composition right away just from making a simple beat.
Could you elaborate a little on what the repitching option was doing?
The repitching option? Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Echo works like a old-fashioned like Echo box, like an analog delay or a tape delay rather. And what happens with tape and when you accelerate audio or you change the delay speed, it pitches up and down. And you can actually turn that feature off because sometimes it can be annoying. And you can get it to just jump to the subdivision without getting that ramp in pitch as it speeds up and down. That's a good question. And maybe there's also a good time to check in. Do we have any questions so far?
Doesn't look to be that way.
Okay, cool. And let us know in the chat too if you don't want to be on camera. So yeah, we kind of took this drum signal. Yeah, go ahead.
What would happen if you hit auto in the routing box where you have in selected? Oh
yeah, so let's hit auto. Good question. So let's hit auto, and I'm going to turn this off. Right. So in auto, we need to. We're still receiving the signal from our audio from if we look here, right? But since our monitor is set to auto, it won't monitor until we arm the track. So we'd have to press this red record button. And, oh, wait, what am I not getting? Huh. Try that again. That should be getting audio. Does anybody see something that I don't? Because this should be... Huh.
I think you actually have to record in order to hear. Like it'll play whatever, if there's a clip, it'll play
let me see if that, yeah, so that clip was on, I didn't see that. Thanks, man. Who was that?
No, Eduardo.
Thanks, Eduardo.
No
yeah.
problem.
Yeah, so what he said is there's this clip playing. It's no longer a dummy clip because we're not set to in. You see how it grayed out? So when I was set to auto, I didn't realize this clip was still playing, and so it didn't permit either the routing to continue because the clip will supersede the routing. Very good catch. So now we can hear it, right? And if we take it to auto, I can turn it off by disarming the track, and I'm no longer monitoring it. So usually if you want it to be constantly on, at least for my sanity, I like to turn on monitor to in. And that way I can focus my arming on other tracks where I'm like actually playing an instrument. Sometimes people don't have, they have the exclusive arm on, so when you arm another track, it disarms the original, and it can just be a little bit of a pain to work that way. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
No problem, Tim. Keep bringing them if you have any more questions. So that's, basic routing and using some of the stock effects in Ableton Live. We can also start doing a lot of fun stuff by getting into Max for Live, and I am nowhere going to step into Nate's territory because I don't have the depth of knowledge that he has for Max for Live, but I kind of want to explore it through the just exploratory device, playful, getting sounds out of something. I'm not going to get down into like the nitty gritty, but I'm just going to let you know, for those of you that aren't aware, Max for Live is this additional software that runs with Ableton Live Suite now, and it's running in the background and lets you extend the functionality through devices, extend the functionality of Ableton Live. So things that normal devices in Live can't do, stock devices can't do, you can usually accomplish with a Max for Live device. And if you haven't gotten into Max for Live, there's a lot of great tutorials out there. Come back in 2 weeks and catch that workshop. And also go to maxforlive.com, where they have a huge community of people that are just creating devices for very specific needs and sharing them with the community. So the first one I want to show you is this device called Sampler. You can find this. This isn't actually a for sale, after having said the free devices. You can find this at Isotonic Studios. And it's like a sampler sequencer, basically. And it's got different sections. But the way it works is you drop an audio track in here. And the audio track that I ended up dropping in was that original sample bass recording that Nate asked about earlier. So it's all of the bass plucks. It's 81 bars. And what I like about playing with Sampler is that it's got a lot of really cool randomization features. So I just dropped this 82 bar loop in there, and now that when I play it, I'm going to solo it for you. It's creating that really cool pattern that I fell in love with. It has a delay in it too, so I'm going to make the delay really dry. Make it a little hotter. And I'll walk you through what this is doing. So this is the point in the actual delay where it's going to start chopping. So that's one of the screens, and you can randomize this section by hitting the random button. And just cycling through different sequences, right? So then you can go to size, and it's going to be the subdivision.
Hey,
slice. Yeah.
What is this from a live pack, or is this like independent developer on Max?
Yeah, this is an independent developer actually on Isotonic with a K.com. The developer that made this is Javier Sultu. He's a real cool guy, and I get to beta test some of his stuff and then play with it. And he developed this, I think, 2 years ago, and it's on Isotonic's website. I encourage people to check out Isotonic too. They offer a lot of really cool Max for Live devices to extend the functionality of Live, but then also stuff like CliffX, which is another workshop in and of itself. So we can also randomize the pitch, right? And I'm going to add that delay just because delay makes everything, especially weird beat bloopy sounds, better. We can also change the level of each one of these sequences. So let's randomize that. And a lot of times, I do like to dive in and sometimes even read manuals and stuff and figure out how things work. But I really encourage everybody, especially if you're just getting into working in this type of audio, to play with it. Because again, it's music. The verb play has been attached to music for a reason, because it should bring joy. It should be you interacting with the sounds, not getting in this scientific mode, which is also great. But I think there's a lot to be said about play and fun in music, and sometimes it's discouraged. And it's been the one thing that's motivated me to not give up, is sitting down on a Saturday and just making noises for no reason, and then getting something out of it. Because remember, we were resampling earlier, right? Or we were routing earlier. Since this is such a random device, and I don't want to keep it static, right? What I did for this other turquoise track, this track number 6, I have my input set to sampler, and it's receiving some of the sequences. So as I was setting up earlier this morning, this was the first sequence I made. And then I think you heard this one. And then I can just keep playing, right? And the way that workflow looks is really fun, because you can just, this has no play button. You have to launch the global playhead, and it just starts sequencing. And then what I can do is, this track is set to off because I don't want to hear it. I would need to arm it, and then in arming it, I can just record, and I'm making a clip of what I'm doing with sampler. So I can kind of let it go, maybe each instance for a bar or two, and then let's randomize a few things again, and just maybe go through everything and randomize it. not that. Kind of like that. And then, so now that I have that point, let's maybe play with the size within that. Randomize something different, but keep some things the same, right? And then, you keep this going for a while until you feel like you can stop. And you've got this nice clip with these different sequences, and you can go in and start using your loop region to find different, 2 bar, 4 bar, 1 bar, 1/16th, whatever really like gets you inspired, keeps you motivated. And I always tell folks that are starting to do this and getting into production, it's about finding that one thing, because everything's possible, right? You can make any genre with any sound. You can download a 8 gigabyte library for free if you just download my ebook. But then what? And then the thing is, you find the one thing that inspires you and you play with that thing. Again, that verb to play. You're playing with that thing is going to tell you what it needs. It's not, if you start dropping like a bossa nova beat, there's certain things you can't play with it, and there's certain things you can play with it. So again, even though we are working, quote unquote, by ourselves with a computer, we're working with the sounds and we're working with these ideas that we still need to stop, acknowledge, and pay attention to. And they will tell us, as esoteric as that sounds, the ideas will tell us what the next step is, and so on and so forth, until you've got either a loop or a groove or a song or whatever you're trying to make, or whatever that thing lets you make out of it, right? Because sometimes it's just a cool loop and that's what you'll get, but who knows what it'll be in 2 years when that loop comes back to your memory and you're working on another project. So, again, encourage you all to check out this Sampler Pro on Isotonic, or any device, right, that lets you, this is literally just random plucks. I was going down the bass scale because I wanted to sample this instrument. If I played this back, it would be torturous. I'll solo it and submit you to that torture. And some of them are just like duck quacks and horrible like fret buzzes. But then when you bring that, as lazy as it sounds, right? The old me that used to play the bass and didn't really like have enough respect to sequencing and computer tools would have said, oh, you're just dropping a WAV file into a thing that does it for you. But I think, I've heard a lot of people say recently, the future of music is also seeing us as operators of these processes that are happening, and we're the ones that are orchestrating these processes. We don't have to necessarily have our fingers on the fretboard. We can let a recording of our fingers on the fretboard turn into something else later. And that's what excites me, is that signal processing. Again, to like keep driving in the theme, you start with one signal and one intention, and it can keep turning into different things, right? Again, when I created this pack, I created a bunch of clips with different sound examples, and I wanted people to just kind of play it and be able to hear, that riff playing with a beat, so they can go, okay, I see what that instrument range is, and I can play with it. And if you do download the pack, it's got all these, I like to put instructions in the clips, so it kind of shows you the full sound range. So it gets a little distorted, and it, if you follow along and read the clips, it kind of tells people that are just starting out what this device can do. But then I was like, well, if I want to use this as the starting point for Saturday's presentation, let me add some more stuff to it, right? Because it's like, if we just heard that drum and bass line an hour and a half, we'd go crazy. So Sampler was my go-to. And when I wanted to think of what could I add in Sampler, I always add the thing that I would never use. So it's the original sample source. And it added this nice, little variations and quirkiness in the background. It's somewhat wonky too, which I like, and I appreciate that. And then, I'm collecting clips so that I can have more versions of that and not have to just have Sampler on repeat. But so enough about Sampler. And another thing that I ended up doing was taking the same track, basically. It's that same instrument track, and we're talking about signal processing, and I've been focusing a lot on audio processing, but another signal that we work with in live is MIDI. So there's always two types of tracks, two types of clips, and two types of devices, audio and MIDI. So I've got my imperfect plucker device right here. What's generating the sequence here is this device that is set to be a melodic step sequencer, basically. And it's just called Melodic Steps, and it's a Max for Live device. I think it's in Creative Extensions. And it works a really similar way to Sampler, but it's not sequencing samples. It's going to send a sequence pre-instrument, so it's acting as my MIDI input. And I'm just going to play that so you can hear it. Right? But that doesn't sound like my instrument at all, and that's because I ended up using a few more devices that I'll come back to. So this sequence that is completely made up is also just being generated by this device, right? I can play this track using my controller, but I can also just set it to sequence. So when I play this together, again, like really quick way to embellish a track that I needed to have more movement, more stuff going on. And again, if I wanted to sample that, I would just have to change my input to that track number 4 and go through the same process. And now I can confidently, like the hoarder in me will either get stuck one of two ways, right? It will either try to preserve everything like this, and that's one way of getting stuck, and that is a caveat for this workflow. I'll stop that. The other version of the hoarder in me gets even more stuck because I go, oh, that's the one. I don't want to click this random button because then it's going to change. But that's what resampling's for. So it's like this balance. Don't over collect, just collect the ones that you like. But that'll give you the courage to randomize stuff, or at least me, right? So I'm going to randomize the octave range and the transposition and the length of each one. Velocity, as you can see, a lot of these have similar controls or just being applied to different things. The other one was generating an audio output signal because it was sampling and sequencing a sample. This is actually manipulating, it's actually generating, it's not even manipulating a MIDI signal, it's generating its own MIDI signal that's going in to that instrument device. And what I wanted to do with this is kind of make it less bassy. So a very simple traditional way to subtractively alter your signal is to put a filter in it. It's cutting the lows because I didn't want it to clash with that other bass line. Because the range of the sequencer is going through all these different octaves, and I didn't want to limit that. But then I did want it to sound like something completely different, especially for the purposes of this demonstration. So I added this other Max for Live device called the gated delay. And it just gets really like chirpy and weird, and it's basically it's like a sequence delay that has steps, and the steps are telling the delay when to activate. It's got all these other controls. And again, to be completely honest with you, I haven't had a deep dive into like the how and all the parameters, but I just know that this is one of my go-tos to add randomization. Again, this is not composition, this is signal manipulation, and this is kind of taking things and just playing with them. And this is very, I always forget which one is left brain and right brain. If anybody knows, chime in, but it's the one where you're supposed to play and not think about it. So there we go. So that's what this delay is doing. And then I love this one too. This is a Creative Extensions device called Spectral Blur. If you have Max for Live, I think you can download this for free automatically. And this is in a pack. Gated Delay is also in a pack. And this Melodic Step Sequencer is also in a pack. I think they're all from Creative Extensions, which is the name of the pack. And what this Spectral Blur does, it's kind of like, it just creates a granular haze with this parameter called the halo kind of lingering over it. So I'm going to turn it on. And I'm going to raise the track a little bit and maybe even add a really simple go-to utility and add some extra gain there. It's just like really fizzy and ethereal. You can make that halo a little bit shorter too. Right, and this is dry. We can blend it, but I really wanted it to be really affected, so we're listening to the wet signal. Right, and as we make this halo bigger, we just kind of get this wash. of noise. And this is where I kind of want to stop, because I want to show you just a trick that I really like about adding rhythm to sounds like this. And the way I like to do it is I like to take a gate. I'll add that gate there. Oh, double click. So we've got this gate, and what the gate is doing is it's not letting the sound through this threshold. You know, once it goes through the threshold, the gate is open. So you can see that waveform at the bottom. Once it crosses that line, which is my threshold, we'll hear it. And that's how a gate works. But we can also, in Ableton Live, a lot of the devices have a little triangle button. We can open a sidechaining feature. And don't even get me started on my sidechaining rant, because I have one, and it's real. And sidechaining is a tool, right? It's actually a feature in devices or in effects. A lot of people, you know, because of the popularity of sidechained compression tutorials, because it is a thing, people think that it's the only thing, right? Not only for the term sidechain, that, you know, it can be used for compression, but a lot of people think that it's like the go-to, you know, because the video is titled, "Every producer's must have secret is sidechaining." They go, oh yeah, so let me sidechain everything. And basically sidechaining, again, it's a feature in this device. And what the feature is doing is it's, instead of having this device work on the gain of this input, right? Instead of having the threshold come from this waveform, we can have an external source. So what I want to do is I want to turn on my sidechain feature first, and then select where I want to get my sidechain audio source from. And in this case, I want something rhythmic. So I'm going to go to my drum kit. And I mean, I can right away use something that's there, like, you know, this kick pattern. But I want to add something a little bit different. I want to go to, let's see where the hi-hats are here. Because remember, we can pick the instrument or the actual sample. So I pick the hi-hats. And what I want to go is into this clip. And what's happening is the clips are launching each other because of follow action. So I'm going to actually take that follow action in case you were wondering what's going on. So no action. And we're just going to play this clip, unsolo this so we can get some audio. Right. So we're getting audio. And of course, there are no hi-hats. So I'm going to program some. I need to get out of the envelope view. Let's just get some 16th note hi-hats going. And I'm going to click a few in, but then I'm going to just select this range and duplicate, which is one of the best features in Ableton Live ever. And I'm not going to really mess with the, you know, I always encourage people to play with velocity when they're just repeating stuff like this. But right now I just want the hi-hats to happen, right? Because we're going to go to this wall of noise happening here.
What's the key for duplicating the hotkey?
Good question. So yeah, you can do Command D on anything that you have in Live. So if I click on this clip and Command D it, it'll take it, it's like a copy and paste in one, and I'll put it in the next available slot of whatever it is. So if I'm doing a track, I can Command D and it'll duplicate the track. And if you don't like shortcuts, you can just right click and it usually has a duplicate option right there. So, right, we've got this really noisy thing happening here. It's that, so I kind of spoiled the surprise, but we have that, you know, airy drone, and when I turn on the sidechain, it's actually happening in at the pattern that those hi-hats are happening. So some of the controls that we can play with are the attack of that gate opening and closing, how long it's being held open, and then the release after the threshold is you return back through the threshold again, right? So it has a release feature too. So we can do a lot of interesting things where, you know, maybe we want to not have hi-hats in our composition. So let's go ahead and mute them. But now we can have these like implied rhythm of the hi-hats happening because, you know, just to go over it again, we have this gate, and the gate can limit the audio that, you know, it can be a closed gate that doesn't let audio through, but since we're sidechaining it, it's opening at the rhythm of our hi-hat clip here. And then when there stops being hi-hats, we get nothing opening the gate, so it's quiet again. So then, you know, if you want both clips to have that function, you would have hi-hats programmed into both. And again, really cool. We don't have to hear the hi-hats. We just we can mute them in the track itself and have some fun with that. So then when stuff starts getting rhythmic, and again, we're trying to manipulate the signal as much as possible to do as little composition as possible. Another go-to for me is filter delay. So filter delay is 3 delays, each with a filter, and you can pan them. So we're going to play with it a few different ways. I'm going to put it after the gate. So the gate is making that constant hissy drone cloud be percussive now, and we can continue to play with that percussion with this effect. And it's got these blocks here, 1 through 16 basically, and what these represent is the delay time in 16th notes. So instead of going quarter notes, eighth notes, full bar for the delay, you go 1/16, 3/16, so you can get into some really fun polyrhythms that way. So I'm going to start with this left-right, and then I'm going to introduce the left and the right. So this is your center pan, and it's pan right here in the middle. Let's make our dry a little louder. Bring the volume up a little bit, and now let's bring in a left and a right. Get some more feedback. And I'm really not hearing that much. It's really, It's really not doing much because the signal's already so percussive that we can't tell. So what I want to do is, another go-to for me is bringing this into the hi-hats. So if you ever played with a drum rack, which this is, you know that you can bring in effects right into a pad. So this is my hi-hat pad, and I can bring in the delay into my hi-hat pad. And for this, I kind of want to hear my hi-hat, so I'm going to unmute it in the pad. And what I want to do is to showcase what this delay can do. I'm going to stop it and let it do its thing. But I'm going to also delete this pattern. And instead of 16th notes, I can right-click and change my resolution to quarter notes. So I'm just going to do quarter notes, and I'm going to do every other quarter note so that it's a very sparse hi-hat pattern. And again, I can select that range and duplicate. Right, and it's just a very straight hi-hat. So let's go into this. We're in our delay chain, our hi-hat chain. Let's go to the delay and increase these levels and increase the feedback a little bit on these and open up the filters. And let's bring the level up. So again, that simple delay is turning that, which is a little bit cooler than the 16th notes I had programmed because they were all straight and they really weren't fun. And this is creating some interesting textures. So I've got 6/16ths, 1/16th, and 8/16ths. Let's see what happens if I get a odd number like 5. Start getting some interesting overlap. So maybe let's turn this to 3. Oh, I like that a lot better. And we can tweak the filters a little bit just to create some differentiation. So now let's see what that does to our fizzy, cloudy sound, right? So we're still getting the sound from our hi-hats. So let's go here and say now we're getting it in from, let's see, oh, sorry, back to my side chain. And so what my side chain is set to is pre-effects. So what I want to do is change it to post-effects. Right? So now I can go back here to my drum rack. Oops, wrong track. Let's see what happens when I turn off my hi-hat track. We still have this fun texture that we can play with, and again, we didn't really do, sometimes it's great to like think with your conductor brain or your arrangement brain, but again, I'm really encouraging today to play with audio, play with a signal, and see what you can keep turning it into. And it's still the same boring drum pattern and the one line of a bunch of bass plucks that I ended up recording, and it's starting to evolve into a bunch of different things that can interact with each other in creative ways. So let's see what it starts to sound like when they start getting combined with each other. I'm glad it's not total dissonance because this is the first time I combine this specific combination of things. And then it's up to me to, at a later time, or maybe right after this, get into my arrangement brain and start figuring out ways where I can start, muting things and creating more clips, and then taking some of my ideas into arrangement view. But to get there, at least for me, I need to find those interesting sounds and find those creative ways to manipulate the signal. Do we have any questions so far, by the way?
The chat looks pretty clean.
I
Awesome.
have one that might be a little bit more on the basic side, but
Yeah.
I noticed that when you're doing something and you're like, okay, now I think it would sound cool if it sounded like this, and then you knew automatically what audio effect to use. Is that just like because you've learned all of them, or are there like tutorials that go through each one so you know what it
That's
sounds
actually
like and what it
a,
does?
a really, really good question, because a lot of people ask me that. And I've always been fascinated, more so than like by composing music, by processing the signal. So like when I was playing guitar, I was the worst guitar player, but I love tweaking everybody's pedals to sound the best. And I love getting everybody's amp settings. And everybody hated me because I touched their stuff, but I wanted it to sound a certain way. So that was like the first step in my journey. And then when I bought the suite version of Ableton Live, I said, I spent $900. I need to like make the most out of every inch of the software. That was just the stingy side of me. So I started just playing with it, literally, because there are tutorials. There's the manual first and foremost, which is really useful, and there's a lot of great people putting out content. But I think the missing link, and this is like, I think I need to find a better word for this, which is like vocabulary. I think it takes everybody to preschool and like a bulletin board with index cards. But it's like we have vocabulary to share ideas. We have a really robust speech system where I can describe an experience and you can probably understand it. But that vocabulary is very lacking when we're talking about audio. Or there actually is a robust vocabulary, but a lot of us aren't raised with it. We're not aware of it. So we resort to like, oh, I want it to sound angry. I want it to sound aggressive. I want it to sound fuzzy, things that are very subjective. And that's a great way to like find a middle ground between people, but it can cause a lot of miscommunication. So actually figuring out what fuzzy means to you and then going, oh yeah, it's the fuzz setting in the pedal effect because that's a thing. Or maybe it's a bit crusher because it starts making it sound a little fuzzy. And then you go, oh, then there's a difference. There's distorted like fuzz, and then there's bit reduction, which also makes it kind of edgy and fuzzy, but they're two different things. And then maybe you take a deep dive into some guys video series about bit reduction versus distortion or something. And I think that can be intimidating, but always know that you don't have to know everything. You just have to like be brave enough to explore and drop a device and play with a preset for 5 seconds. And if it's not doing it, go, oh, that doesn't do that. Let's see what does, and just keep throwing stuff in there. And that's, save, 10 years of, learning and hands-on experience. That's probably the best advice I can give you if that's like not an obstacle, I don't want to call it that for you, but just like a consideration where you feel like you don't know, then just start feeding yourself with those experiences. And I always tell people when you drop an effect in, take every knob and go from 0 to 100. And if it has 150, take it to 150. Drum bus or echo. And so do stuff like that. Just always watch your ears, especially when you're playing like that. Keep your master level down in case some of those, if it says gain, maybe don't do that. But just play and have fun.
Cool. And if there's any like one tutorial guy that you think was great and knowledgeable, like you could drop that in the chat later or something, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I don't know if Adam's going to cover any of that in his course, but Adam is, I'm telling you, super, super, super knowledgeable, and he really cares about audio and how things sound. So he might be a really good mentor for something like that.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. So if there are any, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we also have a question in the chat of recording real-time improvised signals in Ableton, and do you have any experience with that and any recommendations on like where you go when you're recording an improvised set?
Yeah, actually I just found the chat too, and I'm posting the link to that instrument if anybody cares to download it. So improvisation, I just bought a no coast, a make noise no coast or zero coast, And I love that for the improvisational nature, and that I'm just lost in tweaking knobs and making all sorts of interesting bleeps and bloops. For me, it's setting up proper gain staging. And I don't know if this is addressing the question, you can let me know in the chat, but setting up proper gain staging and setting up like proper monitoring so that you can get lost in the device and you can get lost in the improvisation, and kind of know that the like engineer side of you took care of you in the session and is going to allow for you to improvise. And then just, you know, roll a clip or record in your arrangement timeline and go back and comb through it later and find some interesting clips. I find that's a really good workflow. Similar to what I did here with that, like capturing sampler and capturing this other sequencer. That's sort of how I work with external gear and improvising in the moment. It's just always having something to capture it, and hopefully capture it in isolation so that you can later bring them in as assets into a song or share them as a sample pack or something like that.
Alberto?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my question. I think I was, that was great, everything you said. I guess I was also wondering within Ableton, you know, because I'll go into, I'll get different sounds going, I'll add different effects, and I really want to record sort of real-time manipulations within. I mean, so yeah, of course you can do it with external devices, but within within the different filters as you're manipulating the knobs, because I know you talked about more like getting to a place where you really like the sound and then you want to go capture the sound. But I'm talking also about like capturing just sort of all of that play mode, that all of those manipulations in real time in Ableton, and like what is the best strategy to capture that recording? Is it through like sends, like sending it to another channel and then recording it on that channel, or how would you handle that?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. And I think this is what I would do in this situation, and maybe we can expand on it based on how it would work for you, because I always say I hate that every answer for my approach to audio sounds like a cop-out, because it's the best approach is the one that works for you and that doesn't get in your way. But what you can do is, you know, if you hit the global record button at the top here, your arrangement will start recording. And if your arrangement is recording and you arm automation recording too, you can actually start recording the launching of clips and the tweaking of knobs, so that anything that you do can get recorded. Oops, sorry. I've got the zoom menu over there, but so you want to enable record automation. I don't know if that happens to anybody, where the drop down, when you're sharing a screen, you get the zoom toolbar, and I can't see the top of my Ableton set. But basically, you see how you're recording your clips launching. Any changes to knobs, any changes to presets can also be recorded. So I would just kind of let that roll, and then what that lets you do is find sections vertically, and you go, this might be like a good section altogether, or if there's a dud in that section in this MIDI, you know, you can find another part that was good, you know. And I'm imagining you might record for like 20-30 minutes or something, and then find those moments. Does that make sense? Or would that help for your situation?
Yeah, I think I've done that before. I think I've messed with that before. And so, yes, thank you. Okay. I think it's just a matter of like experimenting more too, to finding like, you know, that method.
Yeah, because my concern for having you record like just audio is that if you record your automation moves, then you can go back and tweak them, or copy the curve and apply it to something else, as opposed to just having audio that's committed. But that's another great thing. If you want to commit it to audio, a lot of people use Ableton as an instrument. They send it out to like a separate mix board or a tape recorder or something, and they record their session like into audio and on the fly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And let's see, let's get rid of this. What I wanted to show you too is also sort of in the improvisatorial nature of this. That's a word that I always struggle with, even though I love to improvise. And what I ended up setting up is a bunch of different Max for Live devices that I wanted to show you for signal manipulation. And I thought the best place to put them would be the master track, because we get to change. Let's see, let's launch some clips. We get to change this into, just give it a minute. and that can basically go on forever and change. So let me stop that. And that'll stop in a second. I'll kind of walk you through what's going on here. I just really wanted to take it as far as possible, but also not be boring, right? So I added some randomization to always keep the sound evolving, and I felt like this could be, I don't know, something you could have like, I don't know, like some sort of experiential thing, or maybe even like a theater piece or a haunted house or something. I don't know if there's any real practical use for this, but it's self-generative in a way, and it's just, again, taking signal processing to its extent. So there's a Max for Live, or I'm not, sorry, not a Max for Live, it's just an Ableton Live pack that you can buy called Arcam, and it's by this school in France that I think it's like a school for the Institute for like Audio Research. It's in French. It's just an acronym for the French title, but they do a lot of really cool stuff with audio and audio standards and stuff like that. And they released a pack, actually 2 packs, and they just have different effects that do a lot of different things. And again, I don't, you know, for stuff like this, for fun, I didn't want to do a deep dive of like what everything is. But this is just a bunch of multi-band delays. So multi-band delay is a delay that you can find different frequency bands. So each frequency is split into different delay times and has different feedbacks and pannings and volumes. So let's turn off the other stuff and just kind of start from the left to the right. And turn off that echo. Getting all sorts of different delays, pass-through filters. And it's synchronized, so it's moving the bands up, or the signal up through the bands, and it has all this interesting movement. I'll let you listen to that for a sec. And then the one I added to the left of this is, I think it's just, let's see, let me just turn it on to see what it's doing, because I think it's just analyzing. It's like it's a granular delay. So you're going to see these are all working in real time. So it's going to take it a second to get that signal, and all the incoming signal gets processed and gets turned into grains and pitch. And you can really play with the texture of it. And it still doesn't. It sounds a little random, but not too random, and it doesn't sound like that would be too interesting. It might be very disorienting for a while. So then let's move on to this other device, which is just a multi-effect, and it's just adding a delay and some reverb, and it's adding an auto pan so you can have some movement and some fun. I'll let you hear that for a second. These 3 are from, I think the blue ones are from the Arcam Max 2, I think, because there's 2 packs, and this orange one is from Arcam Max, just the regular pack. So then, that's enough of that for a bit. After that, I added the shaper, and basically what shaper is doing is it can add a curve to like an envelope that you can draw and tweak and stuff, or you can just pick these pre-made models to something that we map it to. So what I mapped it to here, where it says transpose, is the transpose knob here that you can see is grayed out because it's mapped and it's moving to that curve. So let's hit play again and hear it with a shaper. Now we're getting some transposition changes, and it's in the hundreds of cents. So let's turn that off. You can kind of tell the pitch of the grains is sort of static as opposed to this. And then this other device is called LFO, and it's part of Max for Live's just basic pack when you download it and install it. And what LFO lets you do is map an LFO curve to another device. So what you do is, you know, you click on this button that says map, and then you select the feature. So I mapped it to this GR attack, so the grain attack, and it's moving at the rate of that. So to unmap it, I would click X, and then to map, I would click map, and then I would click it back to grain attack, and then that's doing its thing, and it's moving at the rate of 2 bars, and it has 78% depth, so it's giving it a little bit of range, and that's giving it some more variety. And then I map this LFO to the feedback feature here, just back and forth, just to keep, and this has a randomized curve instead of a sine wave, so it's actually a sine wave with a lot of jitter, and a lot of the jitter you can add here, and you can smooth it out too, so you can really play with, you know, as if you were a human being moving these in an imperfect way, so to speak. And then after that, I wanted to add some echo, just to keep things moving and bouncing and a little bit more interesting. But then I mapped this LFO to the feedback of that echo at a random wave. So you can see the feedback changing drastically. And again, what you can do is you can record that. So, you know, we're still using this track number 6. If we wanted to capture some weirdness, we can select the input to resampling. And when you set it to resampling, you're basically inputting anything coming out of the master track. So we can arm that. I'll let that play a little bit, because what I want to try for the last example is getting this craziness and dropping it into sampler, and seeing if we can find something a little bit more usable. So I'll just subject you to this to maybe 3, 4, 5 more minutes. Just kidding. All right, we'll stop on that one. All right. And, you know, this is in my master track, so if I want to stop hearing that, I'll just stop it. And it's that, you know, indie poppy thing happening again. So, as promised, let's try what happens. So we've got this audio recording. If you're not familiar with resampling, I basically recorded what we were hearing. And it's a 12-bar recording, and it's just all that random stuff that we caught. If I go to sampler again, so this is what sampler looks like when you drop it in. Then you need to open the instrument view, and you get the actual window to play it. And it's got push integration. It's a really like well thought out device. It's got a lot of depth to it. So what I want to do is, you know, this is the clip I made. I want to grab it and I want to drag it into the sampler box. Oops, waited too long. Let's get that out again. I'm just trying to drop it in the sample window. And now my sample's there, and let's play that back. So let's solo sampler. And let's randomize the point. Let's randomize the pitch and the delay.
I know you said this is a sampling device that you bought from that guy you knew, but is there a stock one that comes with Ableton?
Not that does this specifically. What you could do also, so if with stock plugins, that's a really good question. Because I always hate that the answer is buy this, and a lot of times in music making it is. But the cool thing about Ableton Live is that you can always find, you know, more ways to do something that's similar or the same thing. So I dropped in Simpler, which is free in the intro version of Live, and we can grab that sample and drop it in there. And Simpler has 3 different modes that it works in. It's got Classic, which lets you turn this into like a chromatic instrument, so we could play it like a piano and pitch it up or pitch it down. I'm playing my push. We can do one shot, which I'm not going to do because one shot just plays in and it doesn't stop until it ends, and I don't want to have to listen to everything. And then one shot is basically what we use in drum racks like this, so that we do a hit and just hear that one hit as a one shot. So then, where was I? Oh, Simpler right here. We can also go into slice mode, and in slice mode, you basically slice your original audio source into playable slices. I'm playing that with my push, but what you can do, so I'm going to create a new MIDI clip by just clicking on an empty clip slot, and now I can use my piano roll here. If I click on the headphone icon, I can monitor it, and you can find the little samples, and you can actually sequence them yourself. So let's do a simple pattern and see what happens. And again, using randomness, maybe draw something, I don't know, and let's see what happens when we first do it. What we can do within Simpler is add more gain.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. Like after just again, I just literally drew this randomly and blindly, and if I didn't like it, I was going to change it. I wasn't going to just let it be. But now maybe that's going to inspire something else, right? Because if we saturate this and we can compress it and we make it a little bit dirtier, maybe we add a drum. Let's add a drum bus. That's the something I want to try, because that lets you process signals in a really interesting way. And it took people saying it multiple times to me this month that drum bus has 2 S's. I always forget that it has 2 S's. I like to play with this transient control in drum bus, and what it really does is it's controlling the length or the sustain-ish of the transient, so we can actually make it a drier transient or a longer transient. And what I wanted to do is make it shorter. So let's play it normal, and let's bring this to the left. See how it just got a little bit more percussive? Maybe we can crunch it. And then take the damper off. And then, that just right away, if I bring my beat back in, it works, right? And that's the beauty of working with a grid, and that's the beauty of working with devices that are always integrated and they're working with each other. You can really, really get into play mode and forget about structure and did I turn this on or did I blah, 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 all these like insecurities that we may encounter when we're making music. And you can just get to making music and making sounds that, again, we made these little loops. Maybe they won't work here, but they might work somewhere else. Or maybe you put them in a pack and share them with people on social media and you make some friends and they make some music with your pack. This weird sample might inspire a completely new thing because, again, we're always listening, especially in improvisation. You want to listen to what's happening in the moment, not the initial intention that you started with. So sometimes I might get rid of everything else and then just turn this into that weird Halloween random self-generating bleep bloop thing. And that's what that project that started off as a plucked bass line from a Facebook Marketplace purchase can turn into something completely different later on. And that's about all I've got, unless anybody's got any questions. I really wanted to just show you from like that initial beginning of the sample.
Question.
Yeah, go shoot.
So with the Maxwell Live, that's a whole different software, right? That's not that's like not integrated.
That's a good clarifying question. So it's integrated into Suite.
Oh,
so
okay.
When you open Ableton Live Suite, when you purchase it, it's already part of your license. But when you open it, it opens in the background, so that you can seamlessly drop in this sampler. And for those of you who know, this is a really good opportunity to show you what Max for Live is. This is the device that we see and how we interact with it. But Max for Live gives you the opportunity to click on this Max for Live icon, or the patcher icon, and it's going to open the actual application in a bit called Max for Live, and it's a standalone application. And what this would let us do is go under the hood for multiple reasons. One, maybe we just want to see how things work. Two, we might want to learn how coding works and maybe start getting into this programming language, which you'll see in a second. Or three, which is another really cool part of this, and you always want to do this with the consent of the original creator, is you can take somebody's ideas and further them yourself or limit them to a specific way that you want to use them. So, we've opened Max for Live. I think everybody can see that here, Kyle? Yeah? Cool. And then, so this is the display view in Max for Live. So we've got these 2 buttons activated at the bottom. We can unfreeze, which lets us edit this device. And then we can get out of presentation mode into patching mode. And once I get into patching mode, this is the patch that somebody made in Max for Live that is then turned into the device that we interact with. So the people that make these devices, Javier, who made Sampler, put a lot of thought into how he made it as a designer so that it was efficient for him, but then how I was going to interact with it as a user, not caring or thinking about him as a designer and a developer. And you can see, you can color code stuff. You can create areas where your user is going to interact with the Max for Live patch. You can also have a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people will never see. And you can also, it's a visual programming language. So these are called objects, and each object has a different function. And you can connect them through these patch cables. So it's very modular. It's very easy to get into, but it's so deep that, my hat's off to people that are really, 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 really into this. So again, I encourage you to come back for both weeks and learn some more about Ableton Live, and especially Max for Live in week 3, because especially if this intrigues you. Like there's nothing, like this just looks cool, right? It looks like somebody's inside somebody's brain. And once you start figuring out, you know, the intelligent choices that they made and creative choices that they made to make this happen, you start having a further appreciation for all these free things that people are putting out, which is a great time to be alive and be a producer, because people are creating, like I'm in Facebook groups and all these like producer groups where people go, hey, is there a way to blank in Ableton? No, but here's a device I just patched for you in 15 minutes. And somebody makes a patch that works for you. Or, you know, you can go even further. I know there's a lot of developers that you can pay to make the instrument of your dreams or the effects device of your dreams, something you've always wanted to make. There are talented individuals out there that will make it for you. And it's a great time to be getting into music production for many, many reasons, and that's just one of them. But that's Max for Live. It used to be a standalone. I mean, it is a standalone in the sense that you can get into the editor. I'm not going to save my changes because I would ruin his patch, but it is running in the background of Suite. It only works with Suite, doesn't work with Standard or Intro. But it isn't really something you have to launch. It doesn't really work like a plugin. It's very stable because it is fully integrated. And actually, Ableton, the company, purchased Cycling 74, acquired or merged with Cycling 74, I think 2-3 years ago. So they're, you know, very much sibling companies that are co-developing and always considering each other.
I have a question.
Shoot.
This just might be me being dumb. It seems like you have a lot of your volume faders in the middle, especially earlier on in the program today. Is there a reason? I mean, it makes it seem like, because I generally have to turn stuff down, so that sucks. Maybe I should start in the middle. What's the idea behind that?
Good question. My tendency, especially because I'm very play-oriented, is everything always ends up sounding like crap, so I have to bring it down to make it sound workable, I guess, when you get into that technician side of your brain after you play. So I was making this in my kitchen on laptop speakers earlier this morning, and you know, I just needed it to sound big for those laptop speakers. But then when I came over and sound checked with Kyle, who, hats off, and let's give Kyle a round of applause for putting this together and sound checking and promoting and everything that he does. I think he soldered the connections to Zoom today. Zoom called him and they made him solder the connections. So anyway, I forgot where I was going. Oh, yeah, so the levels, I was just trying to be considerate to you all and Kyle, and then when we did sound check, I wanted my master to not be a little bit louder than my voice, but not compete with it. And then I didn't want the tracks to peak as they were getting into all of these weird processing effects. So this is very much just like not letting it get out of control in the presentation. And I knew I could make things louder, but I knew it was hard for me to, like, within the presentation, have the like presence of mind to go, oh, this is getting too loud, because you usually forget about that and you get lost in the loudness.
And Ableton in general sums really, really hot into the master compared to other DAWs. Like, you can pretty much clip your master with one track if it's loud. So yeah, I mean, I'll often just turn everything down before I even start producing, just because I know it's going to hit the master like crazy hard.
Do you have a number, Adam, that you tell people, like, you know, like, I know it's case by case and it's different, than you need different meters, but any number that people look out for?
Oh, you know, maybe like -12 dBFS or something is a good spot. I know a lot of producers will actually set their default live set to where all the tracks are there and already lowered, just because they don't want to be clipping after they mix two things together, you know.
Man, you set up your home studio quick, bud.
Yeah.
That's cool. Do you have any other questions? Oh.
And I was just going to say thanks for your answer. And
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
I have another quick basic one.
Yeah.
When I noticed in one of the audio tracks, like behind this the sampler, yeah, there's like 6 of them or something, and throughout this course you were able to record little bits and put them in there. So hold on for later. I just wanted to know how exactly you did that.
Yeah, I might have gone over that a little too fast, but basically a really often overlooked but super powerful feature in live is routing. And routing just means that you're sending a signal from one place to another. So like the typical signal route is it goes into a track, and then these drop downs tell us where the audio is coming from. So it says audio from, and then we have an audio to. So I always like to read that as a sentence, right? My audio is coming from the drums, and then it's going to my master. And usually things go to the master because, like Adam was saying, things are summed there. And traditionally, you want to bounce a master so that your mastering engineer can receive that master, or you want to just share that master of your recording. So you were asking, sorry, I blanked out completely on the question going into that master. You're asking about how is recording here, right?
Yeah, because like I'll be playing something and I'm like, oh, this is cool, I want to keep it. And then
sorry, the coffees is starting to wear off, and my brain's retention is lacking. But yeah, so what I did is I just used this track number 6. I used it as my capture track. I always like to just, if I'm sampling or capturing random stuff, have a track where that goes to. And so what I did is I was changing the audio from throughout the session today. And I can say, well, I want to capture maybe that sampler track. So I say audio from, and you can go down and you start seeing all your tracks. And you can select, you can see sampler there. So now I know that my audio for this track is coming in from sampler. So whatever sampler plays, I will capture. And then later on, I change this to resampling. And when you have that set to resampling there, it's capturing whatever you're hearing, usually coming out of your master track. So that's how I was able to record this last audio clip of just that random noise and stuff coming out of the master track. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That's a really good question, because I think routing is very abstract since you don't see cables connecting one thing to another, and it's literally just these drop downs. It's easy to forget what's going where. Another thing that works like that is sends and returns. So you really can't record into a return track, but you can have effects that you can send, from this track exclusively, using these knobs to send the signal to A in parallel, or to B, or to C, and you can add effects. And something that I wanted to show too, that I learned this in a video, I can't remember who, I wish I could credit the person, but so if you have drums, and this might be something that a mixed professional like Adam would cringe at, so chime in, Adam, let me know your thoughts on this. So you've got your drums playing, and the guy was like, sometimes your drums are dull and you want to add some air. And I would have never thought to do this. And I don't know if you all seen this. He used a vocoder. And this is what the vocoder is adding to it. So it's basically just adding noise. And you can select the bands that you want to have. So I just played with the high bands. And I'm going to start sending using this knob. So for those of you who never used sends and returns, watch this vocoder track, the levels here. And as I change the knob A, it's going to start feeding a signal there. See how it just got brighter and like airier and hissier? I mean, it's not ideal, but I felt like it sort of was a cool hack that it helps drums get a little bit brighter in the mix, or get a little bit more air. So that's sort of how parallel processing works, is you're getting the original signal plus, this parallel processing sent to the master. But yeah, and then just resampling works the same way, where you're sending the signal to a track that can record, right? So the next step would be to say, arm this track to record. And when you arm it, if you notice, the clip slots go from stop buttons to, once I hit arm, they turn to record buttons. So then you can record on those clips and make individual recordings of things.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm always in arrangement view, so this is really interesting.
Oh, wow. And you can actually get into this in arrangement view too, because if you go to arrangement view, we've got our routing features here. We've got audio from and audio to at the bottom. So you can still route in arrangement. And what I find a lot of people do, this might make sense to you, if this is your loop region in your arrangement. If you loop that region, this 8-bar loop, and you start building vertically, then it's almost like you're recreating your session view. So if you've ever done that, if you ever looped a section in your arrangement, you're kind of working in session view, but your own way, so to speak. But yeah. Any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat. I'm going to share my Instagram with anybody that's still here in the chat in case you want to stay in touch and ask any further questions or anything like that. And I do want to keep encouraging you. I love dadageek and the people there. So just check out what they're doing and try to find ways to get involved, because we're trying to build a community in Austin that currently didn't exist or historically didn't exist and is currently struggling to find its place. Not dadageek, but I think us as individuals. Like, Austin's a pretty fragmented city and Texas is a pretty fragmented state where we don't all get to interact, and we can all continue in our own desolate little islands. But I think we're more powerful as creatives when we start grouping with each other and getting inspired by other people. And I think learning, and especially if you're making music with technology, is pivotal. Otherwise you get stuck and then you're just, you know, another dinosaur. But yeah, let me become a human being again. And I want to thank everybody for coming out. It was really cool spending Saturday with you.
Yeah, Alberto, that was awesome. I'm sitting over here making some really bizarre bass lines inspired by whatever in the world you were just doing. So I'm destroying some sound over here.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to hear. I expect the same from you, Tim.
Tim doesn't know how to not destroy sounds.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Coming.